Thank you, thank you. I just want to echo what Erifili said about you all coming in here on such a hot day. Really appreciate it. But just unfortunately want to tell you it's about to get even hotter with Miss Mae West. And it is my absolute pleasure to introduce She Done Him Wrong, which was written by and starring the incomparable Mae West, a woman whose career spanned 8 decades and included every single medium of entertainment. West was a pioneer of the screwball comedy style. Long before the genre found its feet, her bawdy double entendres and unapologetic female agency paved the way for the fast-paced, witty Battle of the Sexes films that would come to define screwball. The term screwball was originally derived from an erratic baseball pitch, but it soon came to mean insane or eccentric, and it entered the American vernacular in 1930. But another reason why the genre became so popular was actually the introduction of film censorship through the Motion Picture Production Code, which was brought in July 1934. This meant that writers had to find a way around these restrictive censorship laws. Lovers couldn't be sexy, so they became screwy. Screwball, of course, relied on strong, quick-witted women, and West was the most sensational star of all. She'd grown up with show business in her blood. She was born Mary Jane West in New York City in 1893. Her father was a prize fighter and her mother was a former fashion model. And little Mary Jane gave her first performance at the age of 5 in a church of all places. Her career began in vaudeville in the 1900s when audiences' ever-changing taste required her to continually reinvent herself. So she dabbled in a bit of male impersonation and also did a bit of burlesque. But by the 1920s, she was becoming increasingly dissatisfied with the roles available to her on Broadway. So she began to write her own. And in 1926, she debuted her first play called Sex, which she wrote, produced, and starred in. And it played to packed houses, but due to its immoral material, the production was shut down following a police raid, and West was charged with corrupting the morals of youth. She was given the choice between a fine or 10 days in jail, and of course, understanding the power of publicity, she chose the 10 days instead. She was let out after 8 days for good behavior. However, she was really shocked by the conditions for the women that she saw in the jail, so upon her release, she made quite a substantial donation, which allowed them to set up a library, which of course she said had to be in her name, so the Mae West Memorial Library was established. And undeterred by this whole experience with the play Sex, she created another play called The Drag, which was billed as a homosexual comedy in 3 acts and featured an all-gay cast. Now, at the time, this was a really bold move as the Actors Union banned openly gay people from speaking roles. And even though the play was really successful off-Broadway, critics gave it negative reviews and it closed for its portrayal of homosexuality and cross-dressing. Next up, she wrote another play called The Wicked Age. Unfortunately, this one flopped, and I really have no idea why, because you had 34-year-old Mae West playing a 16-year-old cocaine addict called Babe. Sounds like dynamite to me. But it was her next play, Diamond Lil, that made Hollywood sit up and take notice. So in Diamond Lil, she plays a woman beloved by all men who gets caught up in the many illegal operations of her criminal boyfriend. This character would be the blueprint for every single character she would later play. Now, she was almost 40 when her Hollywood career began, a late age to start now, but all the more unusual back then. The industry that she'd entered of the 1930s was ageist, sexist, and overwhelmingly white. And West, of course, had to operate within the confines of this environment. But that did not stop her from making transgressive pictures that disturbed conservative Hollywood conventions. For example, roles for African Americans were limited and grossly stereotypical, but West tried to subvert this through the dynamics that she created with the women who would play her maids. There's an equality to the relationship she has with them. She acknowledges them directly and she plays off their wit. Of course, this doesn't undo the stereotype, but it does add a layer of mutual recognition. One example of this in her films is when she's discussing her relationships with her mates. This gives them sexuality. It's a very subtle act, which of course it had to be then, but it does add another layer, another dimension to her characters. Another example of her allyship off-screen was in 1932, when her African-American boyfriend was banned from entering her apartment building. So Miss Mae West bought the building and replaced all the staff so that he could come and visit her freely. This is 1932, just at the start of her Hollywood career. But the introduction of the Motion Picture Production Code in 1934 would put West and her specific brand of humor in a creative straitjacket. So she would return to the stage in Las Vegas, enjoying a record-breaking run, and also reinvented herself as a recording artist. She would return to the movies sporadically over the following decades, and her final film, Sextet, was released in 1978, 2 years before she died. This film flopped. In it, she once again plays a woman beloved by all men, and even though at this time sex was no longer a taboo subject, West had presented the audience with a postmenopausal woman complete with a powerful libido, and I think in doing so, she'd found one last line that audiences were not willing to cross. But beneath the pearls and provocation, West had a message, and she used it to take a sledgehammer to outdated views about what it meant to be a woman. She offered audiences an alternative version of womanhood in which overt sexual desire wasn't shameful or dirty, but actually an expression of independence. She came from a working class background. She had no schooling after the age of 7, and despite this, she wrote plays, novels, movies, music, featuring complex leading women who subverted traditional notions of femininity and class hierarchy. Her work inspired debates, boycotts, and censorship, and it transformed our collective vision of what the American woman could be. Artist Diego Rivera called her the most wonderful machine for living I have ever known. And I think he's right. She didn't just play the game, she rewrote the entire rule book. And she passed away in 1980, having never compromised her voice or vision. Now, our next film is the shortest film ever nominated for a Best Picture Oscar. And when it was released, it was banned in several countries, including Australia, Austria, and Finland. But despite this, it was a box office success, and it saved Paramount Studios from bankruptcy. The film was released at a time when films would, have a 1 week's run at the cinema, but 6 months later, She Done Him Wrong was still packing them out. West famously claimed that she discovered Cary Grant on the studio lot, saying, "If that guy can talk, I'll take him." But in reality, they already knew each other from Broadway, and they would go on to be lifelong friends. And of course, Cary Grant also went on to feature in some of the biggest screwball comedies of the 30s and 40s, which you can see in this season. So although released 93 years ago, this film still packs one hell of a punch. From the moment Mae West swaggers on the screen, you can be assured that you are in the presence of a master. So before we get to the film, I'll leave the last word to Mae West now. It's one of my favorite quotes. She said, "You only live once, but if you do it right, once is enough." And she certainly did it right, and we thank her for it. Thank you for listening. Enjoy the film.